This segment on Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 Radio is brought to you by Richard Carr Buick GMC Cadillac. Learn more at richardcarr.com. Here's David Smoak and Paul Catalina.
Baylor football coach Dave Aranda with me, David Smoak on Sikkim 365 Radio. Do you ever really know who you have as a team or what your team is until they play their first game or they get tested the first time?
No, I think so. I think you know what's inside of them, and I think coaches see the greatness inside of players. I think I think what happens sometimes is that there's never really just a scent, and so the greatest player development is really coach development. And so that when things are hard or things don't go as planned and all this other thing, that coaches can really be better, because you end up coaching who you are. And it's in those critical moments where anything that was built up when the sun was shining and the days are happy and bright that are lost when the storm hits, And so I think the ability to kind of weather all of that and to really kind of invite it, because that is where we grow, and then kind of, to meet people where they're at and kind of build them up, I think builds a better you and builds a better, builds a better person. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you can see the greatness in people, but I think a lot of times it gets lost because the scheme and the ball and everything kind of takes over.
Speaking of scheme, you have a lot of players who are moving into roles that are much more prevalent than they've been because you lost some great players, but you have a lot of them coming through the system. Do you change your schematic or how you look at things based on who now is up next?
Yes. Yeah. I think offensively that's the case. I think we've got a fairly strong tight end room, and so I think you'll see more of them on the field. I think you have a really talented young receiver room, so I think they'll be kind of maturing into more of them on the field as it goes. Then I think defensively you see a really strong kind of front seven. And so you're going to see more ways, not only that they can kind of hold the back end together, but more ways we can kind of let them loose. And then I think in the back end, there's some youth and some really talented people. So there's going to be a lot more true zone stuff early, with the ability to show or to work to show the ability to play tighter man coverage. And so I think all of that is based upon, who you have, what's possible, what best fits us, what is the nature of us, and those things.
A young player who hasn't played much, and then they get their first shot and they make a play. Is there anything not more beautiful than that, but seeing the light come on and seeing them make a play when people aren't sure they can?
Yeah, it is. It is really pretty cool. I think, the journey that it takes, like winning at every level is a thing. So winning in a walkthrough is something. Winning on the first day of fall camp, that practice is something. Winning on the first day of fall camp, padded practice is something. Winning on a scrimmage in McLean, crossing the bridge, is something. Winning in the first game of the season is something. And so, you have to manage the noise. You have to manage the volume from outside in. You have to manage the battle with perfectionism that a lot of guys have, and all of those things are real things. That's really the game within the game. And I think as coaches, to try to understand that and to keep the game simple, like we talked about in just a while ago, simple ain't easy. It's because of all these other things that are real things that generally don't get addressed, and so I think you have to kind of build towards it so that when you do have success early, it's pretty cool.
Last year, I asked you about the difference between the fronts in the SEC compared to maybe the Big 12, and obviously you have a tremendous front. You made I believe what you told me is in the SEC, they just let them run. They just go, and it's more scheme-oriented here. Are you getting closer to what you have up front to what you saw in the SEC?
I'd like to think so. We're going to have to do that in game situations. I thought towards the end of last year, there were times where we were doing that. And so I think, for this year, to be tested continually to where we don't have to see a blitz on Sunday and put it into the game plan for the next week and all of these things that aren't really it, but to do it to where, hey, this is a technique that we've worked on since spring, since summer, since fall, and now it's showing up in the most competitive pressurized situation. That's the ideal. But I think, success can get in the way of that, right? Just like failure can. And so I think that would be ideal for us, but we clearly have to do it first.
Blake Shapen, your guy, he's the #1 quarterback. Does he have a swagger, but it's controlled? How would you define him?
Yeah, he's a reserved guy, and I appreciate that about him. He studies. I'm doing one-on-ones with the team, and guys will come up and they'll say how they were in Blake's apartment, kind of hanging out over the weekend, and he's got like playbooks and drawings all sprayed across his floor, and it's kind of like I don't know, from the sounds of it, it's kind of like that. What was the Russell Crowe Beautiful Mind stuff going? And so that's cool. I think there's that. He does have a real strong hunger, and to have the guys see that, so when we're practicing, the offense is kind of right behind the remainder of the offense. Everyone but the 11 that are practicing at that moment are behind, about 10 yards or so behind the offense. And the guys are cheering and clapping their hands to try and give some energy. But there's times when Blake makes these throws, whether it's the arm angle or the release point or just the velocity on the throw, where guys are going, "Oh, did you see that?" Sometimes it's like, "Did you hear that?" And so I think like those things combined with the studying part, right, and not saying a lot, I think are really cool ways to go about it.
I shared an email or two with Dr. Lynch, and I know Dave Wilson wrote an article about you a week or two ago, brought him up, and he's going to come on with us a little bit later on. You've mentioned this before, that you've spent money when you really didn't have it to go pick the brains of people. It all paid off. It seemed like, how do you know when you should or shouldn't, when you could or not do that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I remember. So I was at Texas Tech, and we were in it was a sports psychology class, and probably the thing I was probably at the most while I was at Tech was the Barnes and Noble bookstore. And so I'd be walking up and down, and the people knew who I was, and Dave, nothing new. And then it got to where I would say, "Hey, did you find this?" And they're finding books and stuff. And so I remember reading all of his books, and and I think it eventually became a book that I think it was Mark Lochbaum was the name of the professor at Tech, and so he actually used that book for that class, Thinking Body, Dancing Mind, in his class, and so we were having that. So it's just, it was a cool time, but for me, it's like to venture away from that and kind of get lost in ball, and that's always the thing. It's the stuff that we're going to fight right now, because it's such a you think about the power that ball gives you. You think about the control that it gives you. You think about the blaming and the shaming opportunities that it gives you. It's a drug, really. And so to lose, to fall, to get lost in it, and then to come back to all the stuff that you were into before, and to find out that's really you is kind of cool.
When was the last time you lost your temper?
Long time. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time. I keep thinking maybe something will do it, but no, it hasn't. It hasn't happened. I don't know.
Is that part of what you've learned?
I think I was kind of.
What you can control and all the.
I think I was kind of born that way, probably. And then, I just think, typically, people. I was talking to someone about this the other day, where I think typically people like me, we get murdered before we get to this seat. We don't make it this far. We're kind of stomped and beaten to death on the side of the road, right, by others that are just more, forceful, assertive, quick to judgment, loud, powerful. And so I just think, to kind of take something that was kind of a weakness and try to show it as, there's power in weakness is, that's part of what this is.
Did any of your players read that article about you? And did anyone comment about it, that maybe they learned something about you that they maybe didn't know, or did you even get feedback?
I did not. Now, I've gotten some feedback on it from recruits and their families, but with our players, I have not.
How many hours of sleep on average do you get during football season compared to off season?
There's less in the season. I think during the off season, though, it's usually I'm up here pretty early too. And the difference is I'm usually getting shut eye a little bit earlier in the off season. Where in season, you're kind of getting it on both ends. But I think that is generally for us early in the week, and we try to by Wednesday kind of tamper that down. And I think to keep coaches fresh and do all of it is a huge part of that, because I've felt that before, to where 4 or 5 cups of coffee before noon isn't ideal. And sometimes in the past that's been the only thing kind of keeping you up. And so we try to build so the Sundays and the Mondays and the Tuesdays are kind of your days.
What do you enjoy more, practice or game day?
Practice. Yeah, I think, there you can see, I wouldn't say it's 100%, because the ball can bounce a bunch of funny ways, but you can tell if the attitude's right, if things are hooked up right in practice, just by how you're attacking little things. Guys are running on the field, right? Guys that aren't getting reps are focused on the guy getting the reps. Guys are teaching other guys, right? Guys are the effort at the end of practice and the energy is greater than it was in the start. And so when you are like that, just that part, 'cause it's funny, because I was who is it? There's a coach here visiting this past week, and we were talking about the time at Utah State, and I was there for a year, and we had a great season, and Gary Anderson was the head coach, his great friend, and he was asking me about memories, and I just told him, I remember that, I remember I was on the mayonnaise line, so we would as coaches, we would make sandwiches for the players to eat, and I was like the mayonnaise guy the whole time I was there, so I knew where to go, and I did it, and then he asked me, what else do I remember? I go, we'd after games, we'd all go to Gary's house and hang out, and our wives would go, and there's a pool, and you'd hang out there too, but it was nothing with games. It was nothing. I couldn't remember.
Nothing about, yeah.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and I think it's always that way. But I think when you're in it, your perspective gets so, you're looking out of a straw with the pressure and all of it, and so it's just kind of a natural thing.
One more thing about football. You have your defense that has this great front seven. The offense, obviously, with your offensive line and quarterback. How did you manage letting the offense get their legs under them and yet letting Coach Roberts and the defense do what all they want to do with their aggressive, the way they play the game?
Well, I appreciate that. I think it was great communication between Ron and Jeff. I think really working, and they did the work to communicate and to, hey, this is kind of where we're at. How do you feel about these blitzes? Yeah, this is great. Or, hey, we want to try to get some shot plays. We'd love it versus this coverage. Yeah, that's good. And just that type of communication. I think, so many times in practice, it can turn towards, it's me versus you. And, no one really gives a damn who won the third, day of fall camps, team period 2. No one remembers and no one cares. What we're trying to do is get guys better, and it's me with you, right? Getting you better, you getting me better. And we're both trying to beat what we did yesterday. And I think to see it that way in a longer view is sometimes difficult to do because of the training of the past. You kind of have to unlearn what you've learned.
Last question. You look out all this construction, built, growth, arms race in college football. Compare it to 2 years ago when there was the cloud of COVID, to last year to this year. What do you see? What do you see when you look out this window?
I see a becoming. I think I love driving in and seeing the Welcome Center. You can drive by and see where that basketball arena is going to be and just how cool that's going to be, just in downtown area. And then, I think just the symbol of just continuing to grow, continuing to improve. I think that's just a way cool thing, and I can see that everywhere I look.
Like your football team.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Baylor football coach Dave Aranda, 365 Sports.
Holy cow, has it been a hot summer. You could fry an egg in the bed of a